Candace Owens attempted suicide? When did that get buried? It's true. And today I'm going to bring more of a balance as to why I feel she needs some serious help. And not in the condescending, humorous way. She really needs help before it's too late. And today I'm going to break down for you a 20-year pattern so you can see the big picture, not the past couple months, not the Candace you think you know right now. I want you to see the Candace spread across 20 years. And from there, we are going to determine whether it's mental illness or methodical precision. My friends, please, before we get started today, in the United States, 988, you can call or text it. 988 is the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. So if you or someone you love is considering taking their own life, it's no joking matter. So please do all you can to find help. Please, I beg you. There is always somebody that can listen. I'm here to listen. If you need help, we will get you help. Again, in the United States, text or call 988. Now back to Candace. If she doesn't need help, if she isn't suffering from mental illness, and she is and fully aware of her actions with methodical precision, we have a bigger problem. So today, I'm going to look at this from two different angles and let you, the viewer, decide whether you're a fan of Candace Owens, whether you're not. I want to offer both sides, but in order to do that, I have to give you the big picture. The Candace Owens of the past 20 years. Not the Candace Owens you think you know. Not the Candace Owens you maybe just started following because of Charlie Kirk. Let's look at the big picture and see if we can find some patterns here. My name is Stephen Lancaster, guys, and I bring the facts, whether they are nice, naughty, unsettling, or just plain things we don't want to believe. But I have to because it is reality, guys, and fact. Not all facts are nice. Facts aren't something you can disagree with, even though the left thinks for some reason you can, but that's a choice. Regardless, you are watching Facts Me TV. This is the place where we educate, not fabricate, guys. Suicide isn't a joke, and it underlines a very major psychological and mental disorder. So I'm going to be tiptoeing through these sections of the show because I take it very seriously, and it is something that should be taken very seriously. But let's look at some of the psychology first before we really kind of get into Candace, so you have comparisons here. Because a lot of people out there, you take things at face value. A lot of people are taking what Candace Owens is saying and holding it as gospel. They're not making any attempt to verify her claims. If Candace said it, it must be true. That is a very, very dangerous way to view things, my friends. If you view politicians that way, anybody in a position of influence and power, you should always question. And most of the time you do. But when it comes to Candace Owens, you don't. And hopefully after this episode today, you have a reason to do so. Because I'm going to present some solid facts, some solid patterns that should have you questioning the validity of the things she says. Now, a great amount of suicidal individuals suffer from borderline personality disorder. Individuals suffering from BPD, borderline personality disorder, often exhibit paranoia It has emotional intensity, fear of abandonment, unstable identity, and impulsive behavior. These are all things Candace is and has been exhibiting since Charlie Kirk's untimely death. Nobody can argue her rise in paranoia. Nobody can argue that fear of abandonment. She lost the man she loved, Charlie Kirk, twice. When you really think about it, he forced her to resign from Turning Point USA, and they hadn't been physically together in 6 years. Then, of course, he's murdered. So she lost that chance that there would ever be a reunion. Nobody can argue her impulsive behavior. Each day brings a brand new conspiracy, a new theory, and new hype. All with each and every one of them ultimately proving nothing. 2.5 months, and nothing has been proven. Nobody can argue her emotional intensity, her passion. On my previous videos where I talked about Candace, her fans naturally default to the if you disagree, you hate her, and you are her enemy. That is the most contradictory statement coming from alleged conservatives or people on the right. I don't hate her. I'm not her enemy. I want the woman to stop, and I really want her to get help. Because I'm kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. Do I want her to have a mental illness? No. Do I want her to be lying and manipulating people on purpose? No. But she's not telling the truth, so there's no third option here. Now, I've covered Candace Owens and how I don't believe a word she says or has said over this past nearly 2 months now. You know, not only about Charlie Kirk's assassination, but anything she says. Back in September, I was really feeling sorry for Candace. I'm not going to lie. I was really feeling sorry for her. My background is in psychology. That's not something I really make public a lot. Guys, again, I'm just getting my start. I don't know where I'm going to go with this whole fax me thing, but I'm enjoying it. I love to talk to people and have conversation. So I don't talk about myself personally a lot. But my background's in psychology, and I could see red flag after red flag when watching her videos and her online conduct. I did an entire episode of my podcast back in September, shortly after she just began this whole new rhetoric on Charlie Kirk's assassination. I did an entire podcast episode about my concern for her mental health and her well-being. This was me showing genuine concern. But yet I still received attacks and threats from her followers. Meanwhile, I was the only one showing genuine concern for her mental health. I say this because the natural inclination from her followers is to attack anybody who opposes Candace. And I appreciate that kind of loyalty, but me personally, I wouldn't want people loyal to me defending bullshit. I would want them calling me out on it and keeping me on the straight path, the factual path. You know, whereas I have publicly stated, you guys are enabling her. You guys are enabling her. You're not helping her. I want to make it clear that while I have strong convictions as to why Candace should pull back and take care of herself, I also have genuine concern for her well-being. And I seem to be the only one pushing for her to get help. And I've been doing so since September. Have a quick listen, guys. I think it's about 3 minutes before I really get into what should blow your mind about Candace Owens, her attempted suicide, and so many other things that nobody's talking about. You guys are going to be blown away by all this. But have a quick listen to this excerpt from my podcast back in September. Not long after she started her conspiracy theories and odd public behavior following the Charlie Kirk assassination. This is where I discuss what I was seeing from a psychological standpoint with Candace. And I made a plea, and nobody cared, not even her fans. But before I play this clip, understand that before Charlie died, the majority of my knowledge about Candace Owens came from the clips I watched of her with Charlie. Up to that point, I had never watched Candace otherwise. I didn't even know who she was. I always watched Charlie's videos, and she simply just started showing up in them. And to be honest, at that time, I didn't have a problem with her. You know, I guess when you're being handled by Charlie, he wasn't going to let her do what we now know Candace does. It wasn't until the onslaught of craziness that she unleashed after his death that I really began to take notice. But here's what I initially had to say back in September. I firmly believe she has lost touch with reality. And truthfully, I don't think she's doing it out of malice or for fame or for even the clicks. She doesn't need it. I generally believe Candace Owens is suffering from profound grief. After the death of Charlie Kirk, her longtime friend, and by all accounts, someone she cared about very deeply, Candace hasn't been the same. I think her heart, mind, and body are simply not able to process the trauma of that loss. When you couple that with the fact she was asked to resign and leave Turning Point USA years ago, you know, Charlie distanced himself from her because of her half-cocked constant conspiracies. She wasn't a good representation of Turning Point. And Charlie saw the road she was going down, and she was not looking back. So not only was she dealing with the loss of a dear friend she loved, you know, but now she is literally dealing with the loss of a dear friend she loved due to his death. And that's a lot for one person to handle. But there's something deeper here, guys. You know, if you've been following me for any amount of time, I like to really dive into the psychological aspect of things, because psychology is what fuels our society, come what may. And you see, faith and logic are not opposites, they coexist. And when logic breaks down under emotional strain, faith often becomes the only scaffolding left holding someone up. But sometimes in extreme grief, the line between faith and delusion blurs. Clinical studies show that acute grief can trigger psychotic breaks, especially in people who experience sudden or traumatic loss. Psychiatrists even have a term for it. It's called post-bereavement hallucinations. These are not uncommon. Some grieving individuals see, hear, or sense their loved lost ones. And while that can be a normal part of grief, when the person starts treating those experiences as objective fact, it really crosses into delusional territory, guys. Candace recently claimed that Charlie Kirk appeared to her in a dream, told her that he was betrayed, and that the truth about his death would soon be revealed with international consequences. Now just say that out loud. Candace Owens claims she was visited by Charlie Kirk's ghost. Candace Owens needs to stop what she's doing. She needs to take a step back, seek help, and allow the people closest to Charlie, especially Erica, the space to grieve in peace. I'm pleading with her as a fellow believer, as someone who's watched what unchecked grief can do to the mind, to step away from the microphone for a while, take a sabbatical, seek therapy, pray, heal. Do it not just for yourself, but for the millions of people who still believe in you, Candace. Because if she doesn't, guys, she risks losing everything that she once had that made her so powerful, her credibility. Now, sadly, she's become a symbol of what happens when grief goes untreated and influence goes unexamined. We owe her compassion, but she owes us accountability. And we owe Erica Kirk and Charlie's family the respect of letting truth breathe without distortion. So my message to Candace is simple. Faith without reason is not faith, it's escape. And if you truly, truly love the truth, as you've always claimed, then face it, no matter how painful it may be. Welcome back, guys. Now, 2.5 months later, I have a very drastically changed view of her. So let's get into the pattern here. This is what you've been waiting for. The pattern of Candace, that time itself has made her personality, motive, and every being. Okay? Candace Owens has publicly acknowledged in writing that she attempted suicide while in college. So this is no big secret. I'm not dropping some kind of bomb. Okay? She has publicly acknowledged this in writing. So, again, no big secret. I'm not calling her out or defaming her or belittling her for that. But it does add another layer to the mental disorder we have been seeing for months. But let's look at a brief timeline of events. A brief timeline of Candace. Let's say almost the past 20 years. I'm going to break it down here for you. And you tell me what conclusion in the comments you come to. Prior to her suicide attempt, she shifted to homeschooling. Right before college, she was still in high school. She shifted to homeschooling while her family attempted to sue her high school, Stanford High School, for alleged death threats. Does this sound familiar? Because she's doing it now. All right. So she shifted to homeschooling because her family was suing the high school for alleged death threats. These death threats, as you can imagine, were never verified in any way. And since this was a racial case, which they knew going into it, the school board agreed to settle. And Candace Owens received $37,500 in January of 2008. With the board, still to this day, explicitly denying any wrongdoing. Now, in her own words, this is straight from the court case. Straight from the court case. In her own words, from the court case, Candace said, "One night, a group of anonymous boys called my cell phone and left me a series of voicemails. Their words represent the most horrific that I have ever heard uttered against another human being." Reporting on the lawsuit notes, they challenged and alleged that the voicemail contained 2 minutes of death threats, racial slurs, sexual innuendos, recorded by 3 or 4 male voices, allegedly white, male classmates of Owens. So the attorneys were saying death threats, racial slurs, sexual comments, 3 to 4 male voices, allegedly white, classmates of Owens. Sure. So by their voice, they determined it was white males. I'm just saying, if that was flipped the other way and you say, oh, you can definitely tell that's a black dude on that recording, holy crap, the racial stuff that would start. But nonetheless, the case drew attention in Stanford because of the involvement of the mayor's son. So now, without proof, without anybody saying that's who was on this recording, somehow Candace determined it was the mayor's son. Now you can look at it like, hey, how am I going to get a lot of attention from something I'm making up? We attack a politician. That'll make the national news. So initially her complaint is they were anonymous. But somehow they tied the mayor's son to it, which of course caused national attention to the case. Now, you take that how you want to take it. But if I were to take everything I know about Candace now, her history of never being accurate about anything she claims, her 0% fact ratio on all fact check sites, and her constant flim-flamming of conspiracies and theories, one might believe that this was the birth of a grifter seeking attention, fame, and money. Well, like I said, that lawsuit settled due to it being racially fueled. That's exactly what happens in these cases. I've seen it here locally where I live. If it's a racially involved case, they almost 9 times out of 10 just settle it out of court. They really do. So, here's the kicker. No voicemails were ever actually entered into the case. They were just threatened to be. Nobody ever heard those voicemails except Candace Owens. So did they even exist? You would think a court case, the very first thing that would have been handed over were, here are the voicemails. Nope. There is nowhere documented that those voicemails were handed over and reviewed. So did they even exist? This sounds a whole lot like what Candace does now, doesn't it? She makes claims and never has anything to back it up. So what was next for Candace? A suicide letter and an attempt during her time in college at the University of Rhode Island. But here's the kicker. Candace Owens claims she attempted suicide while in college at the University of Rhode Island. There is nothing public about it. If someone attempts suicide, without question, they are admitted to the hospital for psychiatric care and evaluation, and they are monitored. But this didn't happen. In fact, the only record of Candace Owens' attempted suicide is from Candace herself. You'll find a few quotes about it from some news websites of what Candace has said about it. That's it. Again, just something Candace said, like the mysterious voicemails. No evidence of that. Here's an attempted suicide that Candace said. No evidence of that. Anybody in their right mind knows if you attempt suicide, you will be going to the hospital and you will be monitored. That's just how it works. That's the law. So the only thing we've got is Candace saying she did it. In 2023, way later, over a decade later, the New Yorker said she has written of an attempted suicide in college. That's about all you are going to find about it. That's just about, it's just another thing claimed by Candace without any proof to back it up. If she really did attempt suicide, I authentically feel for her. I really do. That is a dark and a very bad place to be, and my heart goes out to her. But if she didn't, well, these are patterns, my friends. She didn't graduate college. Here comes the next big thing to question. She didn't graduate college. She dropped out, claiming there was an issue with her student loans. Yet once again, that's just her word. That's just what she said. There are no public records of this. No document or credible source confirms the exact loan amount, loan terms, lender details. No public record shows the loan was formally listed in a lawsuit or mentioned in a creditor filing, and all that stuff is publicly accessible. Which is all we know. We all know. If you owe money to somebody, there is a paper trail and collection agencies trying to get it. So here's the facts. Federal student loans and private student loans, both are referred to collection agencies when in default. Yet for Candace, there's zero evidence of that. This is the third thing now that she has said, and she has been the only one to say it, and there's no evidence of it. No institution, university, state, loan provider has publicly published her specific loan details. Ever. Because that's not why she dropped out of college, folks. That's just why she says she did. Her borrowing claim remains self-reported, and given the absence of verifiable records, the loan debt claim remains unverified. And the figures she mentioned do not align with the typical costs of college. I've been there 3 times. I've got 3 degrees. The numbers she's saying, get out of here. Anyways, so what happened after dropping out of college? Now we're into the early 2010s, around in there. She did an internship at Vogue magazine, followed by launching a marketing website. Marketing, which, as we all know, marketing is nothing but lies. That's all it is. Whatever's going to sell it to you, right? The site was called Degree 180, where she published gossip. Gossip. You can look it up. And guess what? This part just blew my mind. At the time she was doing her gossip website or gossip marketing Degree 180, she was publicly a liberal and an anti-conservative and also very anti-Trump, which at that time, that's what paid the bills, baby, being anti-Trump. If you were anti-Trump, you got more hits than anybody on social media. So are you connecting the dots yet? Any of this starting to form a pattern for you? Following that, she started a public doxing site. Yes, a doxing site. Socialautopsy.com. It was a website that would dox people. Lived up to its name. She would link their real identities to screenshots of their online behavior because, hey, Candace Owens playing God and playing like she's the end all to everything. I'm coming after you. She's a superhero, guys. The project collapsed, of course, because it's illegal. Anyways, moving on from that, I just had to mention that. So none of that was working for Candace to get into the limelight and to gain fame. An attempt to sue her high school, an attempt at suicide, an attempt at a marketing company, an attempt as a liberal and anti-Trump. Because let's face facts, at that time being anti-Trump was selling like hotcakes. And a doxing site that she thought would be revered and applauded, but instead the project blew up in her face and blew up her public life. So it didn't really work out the way she wanted it to. So what was she to do? Well, she flipped because becoming conservative was now the trend. And that's exactly what she did. She also went out of her way to become pro-Trump. Are you getting all this, my friends? Are you getting it? Are you seeing the pattern yet? And this was when Charlie Kirk took notice of her. Now we're up to Charlie Kirk. Owens was hired as Turning Point USA's Director of Communications. This gave her media exposure, access to conservative events, speaking gigs, and direct pathways into political activism. This is where she became Candace Owens, as the public now knows her, built by Charlie Kirk. Candace became the complete opposite of what she was to become famous. And it worked. And she used Charlie to do it. And she is still using Charlie, even after his death. As history has taught us, Charlie forced Candace to turn in her resignation after controversial comments that didn't align with Charlie's vision. So the Daily Wire took a chance on her, but not for the reason you think, not because she was talented, not because she was great at investigative reporting. They felt her presence would draw viewers. They saw an angle. Daily Wire didn't have women up front, let alone a black woman. So the Daily Wire platformed her, literally as one of the few black voices in right-wing media. The former hater of Trump, the former liberal, was now one of the few black voices in right-wing media. You know, you can't make it up. And once again, she was fired for running her mouth in the wrong direction. because that's how arrogant she is. But at this point, between Charlie Kirk, Turning Point, and the Daily Wire, they had given her notoriety and a platform that put her out there enough to finally land in that spotlight that she wanted. And now she publicly slams the very people that took her in and built her. So these are patterns, my friends. Since high school, Candace has found some way to be the center of attention and controversy. The facts don't lie. I just gave you the timeline. It's all right there for you to digest and come to your own conclusion. You take all this how you wish, but I don't think any person with critical thinking skills can look at all this and not see a pattern of deception, flipping to suit narratives and trends, and of course, money-making schemes. So considering her past right from the start, she's been out for money. And keep in mind, just a little side note here, her husband, George Farmer, is worth $240 million. They married in 2019. Does that year sound familiar? That was the year Charlie Kirk gave her the boot. Connect the dot, kids. I gave you the timeline of deceit. Put it all together. I say deceit if there isn't something truly wrong with her that has been ignored for nearly 2 decades. And I say that with the kindest heart. It's a tough place to find yourself in. Do you want her to be mentally ill to justify this behavior, or do you want her to be a master manipulator? Neither one is good, but you cannot convince me she is factual about anything, ever. Not when there is literally not one thing important that can be verified. Not one. Facts aren't hard to verify. A lie is. Think about that. But moving on. So she was fired from Turning Point in May of 2019. Then married a multi-millionaire in August of that same year. Just a few months after Charlie Kirk gave her the boot, she marries a man worth $240 million. She had only known her now husband for 7 months before marrying into his millions. Do you not see how she jumps from one source to another? Since high school, she has fabricated everything for profit. And you can be mad at that accusation, but I challenge you to bring proof otherwise. Everything she has fabricated and is still manufacturing doesn't have an inkling of verifiable truth behind it. That's your job, my friends. Find proof of her alleged threatening voicemails. Find proof of her college loans. Find proof of anything she has said that has lifted her up, made her a victim, and made her money. There isn't any. If she isn't suffering from a mental illness, she is fully aware of what she is doing. And that makes her a professional con artist. Guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Facts Me TV. I think I'm content on what I have covered with Candace. You know, the last thing I wanted to do was just give myself another opportunity to say, hey, maybe I'm not seeing what other people are seeing with Candace Owens. So I dug into her history. And unfortunately, everything I found leaned more towards what I've been saying this whole time. I sincerely hope if this is all rooted in mental illness, she gets help. As I stated in my podcast back in September, if you guys listened to it, the signs were there, and I called it. I was the only one to call it, and I'm the only one mentioning it now still. I'm a little fish in a big pond, guys. Not many people tune in. You know, who wants to watch this guy? I'm an old dude that just gives my opinion. I get it. You know, I understand, man. It ain't no thing. I'm newer, I get that. But I'm doing my part because I think it's wrong to be enabling her if she truly is suffering. And I think it's wrong if she's being methodical to profit. Either way, she needs help. And whatever the source of her misinformation is, it needs to stop for all parties involved. God bless you, my friends, and I will catch you next time on Facts Me TV.